Now, Max Blumenthal is back on the line. Thanks for that, Max. I'll tell you where we'd got to. Your amazement, in a way, that at the brazenness of it all. After all, it's one thing to have anti-Russian views, anti-Soviet views. That's perfectly legitimate. What isn't legitimate is secretly spending public money proselytizing for those views and then seeking to hook the local population on propaganda that they themselves were forced secretly to pay for.
Yep. I mean, what you have here are two of the largest media networks in the world working through their supposed charitable arms to not only propagandize the public in Russian-speaking areas in Russia's near abroad, including in the Baltics and in conflict areas like the Donbass, where the BBC media action is proposing to act as a weapon of information warfare in a grinding civil conflict. You also have secret coordination between Thomson Reuters and the British Embassy in Moscow to train networks of Russian journalists and use them to further the British goal, which is stated openly in Foreign Office documents, of regime change by advancing the British agenda inside Russia. What they're doing here in secret with British taxpayer money in programs that cost up to £6 billion a year is everything they accuse Russia of and more. And they're even paying ostensibly independent journalists on the ground and working with them, as they state in these documents, to keep those payments secret. Now, if Russia did this in the UK, this would be a titanic scandal. If the documents were there and they were there for everyone to see, this would be on the cover of every newspaper across the UK and across the West. But when I reported this, when I reported these documents and I put them there for everyone to see, Twitter soft censored me with a label warning people that these may be hacked documents and to turn away, turn your gaze away. Don't look at this. This isn't news. And no one in Western media picked up on this shocking news, certainly not Reuters and the BBC.
Well, it's even worse than that, Max. It is not at all unusual for my tweets to gain 10,000 and more likes and retweets. It's not unusual for my tweets to have 500,000, sometimes 1 million impressions. But when I retweeted your incredible article on this from the Grey Zone, I think about 36 people liked it or retweeted it, at least the last time I looked. So they didn't just soft censor you, they effectively suppressed this news about Reuters and the BBC. So this isn't over, is it?
Well, what we saw was absolutely unprecedented. I'd never seen this label applied before. However, there was the incident in October when the New York Post ran a story on Hunter Biden's corruption and nepotism in Ukraine working for Burisma Gas. And Twitter eliminated the link. It blocked the link, claiming that that information came from hacked materials. There was actually no evidence that it came from hacked materials in that case. And in this case, it worked to suppress retweets and likes of my article. So you had to go through another step where Twitter would ask you, are you sure you want to retweet this scary hacked Russian article? Even liking the article required going through another step. And I had scores of people report to me that their browser crashed when they merely liked the article. People even produced video for me of their browser crashing. So this is unprecedented. And what we don't see is when the New York Times is producing articles of mysteriously leaked documents whose provenance is unknown from China, showing China's security regime, or from Iran, they don't get the same label when it's obvious that those documents were the result of some kind of phishing or hacking. And we even saw a CIA agent, a CIA operative, tell Yahoo News late last year that the CIA under Donald Trump, with so many regulations released, has become basically a U.S. version of WikiLeaks and is doing nothing but hack and dump operations, hacking enemy governments and dumping those documents in friendly media. And we see it day after day. So there's a clear double standard here that Twitter itself has become an arm of the very U.S. empire that Reuters and BBC were revealed to be serving.
Yes, and it's the hypocrisy that gets me. As I say, I'm more than happy to fight it out ideologically between the supporters of empire and the opponents of empire. But these are people who tell us that we oughtn't to watch RT, for example, because it's a state broadcaster. How could you get more of a state broadcaster than one which is receiving secret sums of billions of pounds over a period of taxpayers' money to proselytize the state's view on something? Right. It's the double standard, isn't it?
Well, and to interfere in other countries' political systems and to do so covertly is far more invidious than anything that RT does. RT is Russia Today. They say that we are a Russian public broadcaster. They're not hiding it. They're not concealing it. Sputnik, that couldn't be a more Russian or even Soviet name. So they're not hiding who they are. They're just offering media diversity, which is what the British Foreign Office claims to want to produce inside Russia and in its near abroad in these documents. And yet they're doing so by, in their words, this is one document from a British intelligence contractor called the Zinc Network, which you and other British taxpayers are paying for. They want to establish networks of YouTube influencers inside Russia to focus on the Russian government's corruption, to do things very similar to what Alexei Navalny has been doing. And it raises the question of whether he is part of this covert influence network. And they even discuss, the Zinc Network does in its document, arranging covert payments for the UK Foreign Office so as not to create problems for them with the Russian government, which regulates foreign-funded media. There are also documents showing Bellingcat, the supposedly independent, supposedly open source media organization, being dispatched by the Zinc Network, a British Foreign Office and intelligence contractor, to train pro-NATO media during the North Moldovan 2019 election, in which a pro-NATO candidate was facing a Russian-oriented candidate, and it was likely that if the pro-NATO candidate won, North Moldova would join NATO and the EU. So Bellingcat gets rushed in by the British state and its intelligence arm to weigh in and meddle in this election on behalf of NATO. This is absolutely scandalous. Can you imagine if the Russian foreign ministry or the Chinese foreign ministry reached out to the gray zone and said, there's a really important election in Georgia, in your country, and we need our candidate to win. Can you get down there and train up some media and teach them your techniques? And then this got out there. If that got out there, we would be on the front pages of the New York Times and every other newspaper. We would go to jail. Yet Bellingcat is still celebrated as the gold standard of investigative journalism. This is a scandal that shows how deeply tied up the Fourth Estate is with the intelligence services. They're essentially acting as one hand on Russia's near abroad.
The cynicism of it is breathtaking, even for someone as long in the tooth as me. As you put it earlier, if the Russians were revealed to have spent $6 billion on information and counter-information psyops like this, it could bring politicians down. It could bring publications down. It would be a monumental scandal. Now, thanks to Anonymous and you, we know that precisely that was done by the British state over a long period of time, and you can't even put it on Twitter without it being suppressed, far less expect any so-called mainstream media outlet to report it. So what happens now? to the standing of the BBC and Reuters? Have either of them even attempted to defend this?
Well, I reached out to Reuters because I thought they were more likely to respond, and they did. I don't even know if they knew these documents were out there. And they claimed that this was all something that they were doing in the public interest to advance democracy. They used boilerplate language. But one thing I presented them with was that during the 1960s and 70s, before I was alive, Reuters had a secret program coordinating with the British Foreign Office to produce covertly anti-Soviet media in Latin America. And those documents, that program was exposed just because the information about it was declassified. It was actually an MI6 program. And Reuters in January 2020, through a spokesperson, not unlike the one I spoke to, said that we don't do that kind of activity anymore. You have to go to our website and just read our trust principles, where we abide by independence and editorial integrity, and we don't have any funding from the government. So what these documents expose is Reuters openly lying to the public and participating in the same program. Their trust principles have been absolutely shredded, and yet no media has reported on the content of these documents. What happened instead is absolutely remarkable, and I think it really shows an act of resistance by the public, where when Twitter applied this warning label, this scare label to suppress reads and views of my article, people started to meme the warning label. What they did was, if you took the link to my article and tweeted it with any photo you could think of, like a photo of your first child, for example, or Alvin and the Chipmunks, it would say these materials have been obtained through hacking. So the comedic potential was limitless. The article went viral. It practically shut down our website because it overflowed traffic because of these memes. Bellingcat trended because of the viral attention that they were getting for meddling in elections. And then the media organizations that cover the internet and cyberspace, they began picking up on this, and they began linking to the article. So inadvertently, and thanks to this amazing act of electronic resistance by the people, it wound up getting around the Twitter censors, and the people wound up hacking Twitter back. So I think there is a lot of interest in what's taking place, but this shows how little the media serves the public interest, that they would refuse to report on these documents. And of course, Julian Assange is in jail in Belmarsh prison for doing precisely this, producing public transparency, revealing state secrets that are in the interest of the public, and he's been jailed. So we see that same dynamic playing out with this article.
It's quite a spectacular Streisand effect, that one.
Yeah.
Just for those who, because I'm getting in my ear now, people are saying, I never read Reuters.
Yeah.
But of course, Reuters copy, Reuters material, words, literally the words that Reuters produces end up in the articles, in the body of the text of articles, in newspapers all around the world, and indeed in broadcasts. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. I mean, you won't read Reuters on its website, but you'll read it if you live in Indianapolis, for example. That newspaper, the news copy in that newspaper is picked up from Reuters and AP wires primarily.
Exactly. And so every one of us have been unknowingly imbibing lies paid for by the state about other countries. It doesn't get more cynical than that, really.
Well, here's what your viewers and listeners need to understand. Reuters isn't just a news organization. It's Thomson Reuters. It's this gigantic corporation, and it has this foundation arm. Same with BBC. And if they're feasting at the trough of the British deep state, they're lining their pockets with these multi-million pound a year programs, why would they scrutinize the hand that feeds them? Why would they bite the hand that feeds them? This helps explain why BBC's coverage of the plot against Jeremy Corbyn, the phony anti-Semitism witch hunt, the phony attempt to paint him as some kind of Russian agent, was so poor and so consistently echoed the narrative of his enemies, many of whom were former or current deep state agents. So Reuters, it's the same situation. They're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. And these are journalists who are sitting right there in London. They're sitting on the front lines of the most powerful empire, basically with the UK acting as a proxy for the US. And they are not going to scrutinize the more powerful force here. What they're going to do is act as a force multiplier and help train journalists abroad to help further the goals of regime change, and to do it secretly without the public knowing. And this ultimately will affect their news coverage. And any journalist who tries to cross that red line is going to feel enormous peer pressure, opprobrium, and perhaps be fired if they interfere with the core financial and political imperatives of these two media behemoths.
Max, thanks very much as always. Brilliant perspective there on these dark actors. Max Blumenthal of the Grey Zone Project. You should follow them both. If you're not regularly reading them, you really should be. There's nothing better that you could read. Now,